Week 14, Rob. Here we go.
Week
Not
14,
much time left
man.
in the season.
Yeah,
You
man.
ready for it?
Kicking it up. I love it. So much unfolding, so much still to unfold as we keep talking every week. Sound like a broken record, but there's just so much movement to still be had. And I think a lot of our takes last week, some stuff happened this week, particularly injuries. So I'm going to get into that, but it's an exciting time. That's for sure.
Speaking of stuff happening, we were high on the Niners. Let's jump right to the NFC. I think, what do we say, 2 max of 3 teams could win the Super Bowl coming out of the NFC? How many teams do you think can win? Do you think anyone in the NFC can realistically win the Super Bowl? Like, one game, one shot, we know that, but compared to the AFC, like, who's winning? How many teams can legitimately win the Super Bowl from the NFC?
I think it stays the same, 2 to 3, and the 3 is like a stretch for me, and the 3 is the Bucks, because I think, like we said last week, if they get in, which feels likely at this point, you just hate to see Brady in the play. As an opponent, you hate to see Brady in the playoffs, and I just feel like that could spark something. And love the Niners, absolutely love them. Was going to pick them, or did pick them, to come out of the NFC at least. I don't think that happens anymore since Jimmy goes down. I think they said he's out 7 or 8 weeks, which potentially they could, if somehow the rest of that team picks it up and they get to the NFC Championship or the Super Bowl, he could return. But at that point, it's like, that's another question. Like, if Brock Purdy plays well, which is unlikely, but if he does and takes you to a Super Bowl, do you swap him out for Jimmy G at that point? So I don't know. Other 2 teams are standard, Eagles, Cowboys. I actually like the Cowboys as my number 1 team out of the NFC. I think they have the firepower. I think their defense is absolutely swarming. Micah Parsons actually tweeted this week that their defense is making other teams play scared. And like, that is such a good explanation of what they're doing. They're just all over the place, causing turnovers. Micah Parsons is an absolute wrecking crew himself. So I really like the Cowboys, because when I think about Super Bowl, I think like, coming out of the AFC right now, I like Bills, Chiefs, Bengals. Those are like my top 3. Maybe Dolphins. I would put the other 3 up. So Bills, Chiefs, Bengals. I think the team that can compete with them the most is probably the Cowboys, just based on their offensive firepower and also that defense that is absolutely swarming. So that's my standing right now going into Week 14, how I kind of see the playoffs playing out. So much can change. So much will change. The AFC is still wide open, so we really don't know what's going to happen there. But if I had to pick, I'd go Cowboys right now out of the NFC.
You've got the Cow. I mean, how much separation do you have between them and Philly right now?
It's not much. I like the Cowboys' defense a lot better, but the Eagles' offense proves to be really good. Jalen Hurts has been really, really good. AJ Brown's a stud. It seems like they have it figured out, but I don't know, something about the Cowboys I just really like. I think the only scary thing about the Cowboys that holds me back a little bit, and you as a Cowboys fan could probably speak to this better than anyone, is they seem to just fall apart at some point when it gets towards the end of the season. They look really good every year, and then something happened. Nothing even has to happen, but they just fall apart. And I was listening to ESPN radio this morning or yesterday, and they were saying, if the Cowboys don't make the NFC Championship, is that a failed season? And honestly, at this point, based on the NFC standings and how playoff picture might shake up, like, the Cowboys will probably not have to play the Eagles until round 2 or 3 of the playoffs. So if that happens, if they both win. So yeah, if they don't make the NFC Championship, that's probably a disappointment. Based on how they're playing right now, they're playing really good. And that's kind of why I have them. Like, I think they just have a lot of juice, and you kind of got to ride that going into the end of the season, but they have a history of falling apart. So it's really up in the air. I wouldn't say there's a whole ton of separation, but there is a little bit, or the Cowboys do edge the Eagles for me just a little bit. Where do you stand in the NFC?
Well, Dallas's issue at the end of the season is always like mental preparation. Like when you watch them come, I think we talked about this on last year when we were reviewing the playoffs, and when you like watched them walking out of the tunnel, I looked at my buddy and I was like, "This is a loss. They're just not there." They walked out like it was already a win, and San Francisco came out of the tunnel like ready to roll. Like they looked like they were there to play football. Like Dallas just looked like they were there for dinner. Like, all right, let's order a nice steak, hang out, have mentality. Like San Francisco was ready to go, and their game plan was much more, I guess, thought out, which is not surprising considering it was Shanahan versus McCarthy. But Shanahan, those first few drives were well scripted. They jumped out to an early lead. They had a tough defense. They held on, and Dallas was unable to win it in the end. And then they had that silly expiration of the clock that kind of had there at the end of the game, some mismanagement. That's what ended up ending the game for them. But they still would have needed a 30, 40-yard play on the final play of the game into the end zone and score a touchdown to win. So they put themselves in those positions repeatedly come playoff time. And it seems more mental preparation, game planning than anything. Like it seems like Dallas maxes out their prep and game planning throughout the regular season, and come playoff time, there's no edge. They play it. They're almost too vanilla. Which I know they aren't. These are professionals. Like they have creative, unique stuff in there, but it feels, like they're vanilla compared to everyone else in the playoffs who are pulling out all the stops to win. It doesn't feel like they start doing that until there's 4 minutes to go and they're down 2 touchdowns. They got to score, get the ball back, and then have a crazy 45-second drive to go down and win the game. Like, you're not Allen or Mahomes. That's pretty much the only two that can do that. Maybe Burrow as well, but that's it. Like if you don't have those guys, like you've got to out prepare. You've got to out scheme your opponents. And even though San Francisco was quote unquote inferior, they had a very similar roster last year. They had one of the top offensive lines, great defensive line. So we knew how talented they were. I think Dallas's issue is that preparation, and I think it's going to be similar issue. It's been the same issue with them for decades when they get to the playoffs. Like literally 2 decades at this point. So I can't see that changing just yet. And that's my fear with Dallas. And that's why I can't see them coming out of the NFC. I still can't see them making the NFC Championship, like much less the Super Bowl. Like I can't see them getting past the divisional round. And right now they're looking like they're getting in as a wild card. I can see them getting in as a wild card, winning that wild card round. I think they're done after the divisional round. That's where the music stops for them. It feels like it seems like it always has. And until they have that mental breakthrough and actually prove me wrong, please do prove me wrong. I mean, I'm tired of, being pissed at stupidity for, in the second, third week of January every year. So I would love to be proved wrong there. But I don't think they do. And I think that kind of leaves Philly as the lone team. Tampa Bay, like we've talked about that. They're going to win their division because it's so pathetic. One of the worst divisions we've seen in a while. And once Brady gets in the playoffs, we know how much talent. It's not just that it's Brady. It's that they have an elite receiving core. They have an elite defense. But did you watch that game at all on Monday night? Like, did you actually watch some of it? What did you just think about the play calling? We're not like coordinators or play callers and stuff here. So let's, we're not going to pretend to be professionals, but nothing seemed, I feel like I watched it enough, and I've watched Tampa Bay quite a bit this year, and I kept waiting for, okay, they're going to pull out the stops. They're going to get more creative. And it's like they're just running the ball up the middle for like 2 yards over and over, and nothing's changing. And I'm like, is this?
Yeah. It seems weird, and you say that, and then it's like they get on third down, and it felt like Brady was taking shots on third down the field, like
right,
where it wasn't let's get the first down and readjust. It was like 2 runs or run and a short pass, and then let's take a 30-yard shot down to Julio Jones. Like it was odd, and probably why they didn't score until the last 2 possessions of the game. The Saints defense is not awful, but they're not good enough to to warrant that kind of offensive game plan. And it felt a lot like, I watch a lot of Jets football, and it just felt a lot like that, where we have two kind of give up plays on first and second down, and then third down, you're just praying that they get the first, so you have another chance. You can't keep going to third. You have to get first downs on first and second down. You can't go to third down every single drive, or you're screwed. That's just a losing formula for football. Obviously, you're trying to get the first down every play, but at the same time, if you're running, you're running your running back straight up the center's, behind every play, you're not going to get the first down. You're not going to. Those type of runs don't break out every drive or every set of downs. So. Yeah, I saw that too, and I was kind of just laughing at the end of that game. Like, of course, they're down, and they just need some kind of miracle to score. Like, it was such a boring game. I remember I actually went out to watch the game at a bar the other night on Monday, and sitting down with my buddy, and I was like, man, this game is so boring. And that was like the start of the fourth quarter. And then all of a sudden, they get two chances, they score twice, and they win with whatever 5 seconds left or whatever it was. It's like that's so Brady, and that just felt like a taste of like what this team could be. If they were consistent, they could be so good. Like, they just have so many weapons on offense. Defense is still pretty solid. I just don't know. Like, I think the play calling has a lot to do with what they're struggling with this year, because they should be dominating that division, and they're still only one game ahead of the Falcons.
Like, that game was a massive L for them. If Ingram doesn't go out a yard early, I mean, as injured as he was, he probably shouldn't have been out there. But, I feel like they had some good fortune to even get the ball back and then win the game with 3 seconds left. I mean, I was glad it won me a fantasy matchup, but I'm worried.
That's another thing that really frustrates me. If you want to talk about the Saints don't use Alvin Kamara. I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. I have the only reason I pay attention to Saints offense is I have Alvin Kamara on my fantasy team, but like, they just don't use him. And the one game that they used, so he scored 3 touchdowns this whole year, I think. And it was all that 1 week against the Raiders, which was, I think, like week 7 or 8, whatever it was. He hasn't done anything since. He hasn't done anything before that game. They just don't use him, and then it's like they unleash him one game and see how good he is, and then they just totally forget about him again. Like, if Mark Ingram truly was hurt, unless there's some like locker room stuff we don't know about that's going on, but even at the end of the day, like, Alvin Kamara's he was the best pass catching running back last year. He's probably top 3 still, like, if they were use him properly. That's a win if you get him in there and you give him the ball in that third down or second down, whatever it was that Mark Ingram was a yard short. Because Kamara's going to go for that first. He's not hurt. I just don't understand it watching them. I know they're not very good. Like, I don't think they're good enough to be a playoff team, but if you get you have to get your best players involved or you're not going to win. And that's a game they should have won, and that's a perfect example of them just not using him in the moments that they need him. Like, if you're going to throw a little 5-yard pass of flat to your running back, why are you doing it with Mark Ingram, who's hurt? He's hurt. You have the best pass catching running back in the NFL on your team, and he's on the sideline. I just don't understand it. So, yeah, that was just a weird Monday night game, and it was very Brady-esque to win that game. But like, I almost hesitate back to what you said in the beginning. Like, I don't want to pick the Bucs to be a team that could win the Super Bowl, but I mix that theory with your theory that there's so much going on in the AFC that we don't know who's going to come out of there. And if you put, like, I just feel like there's a good chance that an NFC team wins the Super Bowl based on your take a couple weeks ago. And that was it. And I feel like the Bucs, if they get in, I might take the Bucs over the Vikings, over the 49ers now that they have no quarterback. Like, even the Seahawks, there's really only 2 teams that I wouldn't take them over, and that's the Cowboys and Eagles. And we know the Cowboys especially have a history of falling apart, like we just talked about.
Yep.
And the Bucs beat the Eagles last year. So I know totally 2 different teams. I get that, but it's just like when Brady gets in, it's the worst. Like, as an opponent, it's the last person you want to see in the NFL, regardless of how mediocre of a season him and his team have had.
Yeah. You mentioned the scoring offense, so I pulled up some of the scoring offenses here, and the Bucks currently are 27th overall in the league in scoring offense at 18 points per game. I actually saw a stat a week or two ago that said if the Denver Broncos, who are last in the league at 14 points per game, you saw this, if they averaged 18.3 points per game, they would be 10-3 or 9-3 right now. Isn't that the most insane thing? If literally, and at 18 points per game, they would be right there with the Titans, who are 26. One reason we call them fraudulent, and the Bucks at 27th. If the Broncos were right there at 18 points per game, bottom 5 in the league, they would
be the second best team in the league.
Yep, they would have the number 1 seed.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Like, it's literally, what do they average? Like 15, right, or 13?
No, 13.8.
13, yeah.
It's pitiful.
It's. Do you 2 more field goals or 1 more touchdown in a game? I mean, have you seen the Russell Wilson, like the bathroom thing, the meme?
No, what, the bathroom thing?
Yeah. Elaborate. So there's this, yeah, absolutely. So there's this guy that did, back when week 1 started, said, so Russell Wilson has like a mansion in Denver, and he has 12 bathrooms in his house. So it was how many weeks can Russell Wilson go without, having more bathrooms than touchdown passes? And it was like expected to be over by like week 5. And now we're going into week 14 and he only has 8 touchdown passes or 9 touchdown passes. And he has more bathrooms in his house and he has touchdown passes. It's like, I'll send you it, or we should post it on our Twitter or something. But it's just this funny thing this guy's been tracking, and it's really sad because that's exactly links to what you were just saying. If they had 1 more touchdown pass a game, A, he has more touchdown passes than bathrooms at this point, and B, they'd be the number 1 seed in the AFC. It's like that was one of our predictions coming into the year, or at least mine, was that they were a quarterback away, and I think a lot of people felt that way, and it's really not working out there. So we'll see how much longer they track this stat, but I thought it was a pretty funny one.
That's actually hilarious. You know what we could do is like have a little graphic where we call out the remaining teams that don't have as many passing touchdowns as Russell Wilson's bathrooms, which would be Denver, Denver and Pittsburgh both only have 8 passing touchdowns. The Panthers have 10 and the Giants have 11. Everyone else is 12 or more. There's like 4 teams tied with Russell Wilson's bathroom count. So we got 4 teams to go to try to surpass that bathroom total. And honestly, he actually might not pass it. Like, he literally might not by the end of this year. Yeah. That's the sad part.
But it's also you think about it, he used to have games in Seattle where he'd throw 3 or 4 touchdowns a game. So it's like, he's capable of it, but also goes back to like, was it all about scheme? And we've talked about that in past weeks, but it is such a bizarre stat.
Well, he's a deep ball thrower, and he needs a scheme that permits that. Now he's got, not to go down too much rabbit hole, but they're still a quarterback away. They have talented players, and they have an elite defense. I mean, they had to give away Bradley Chubb because their season was pretty much over, but they had a top 3 defense. I don't know where they're ranking currently, but they were most of the year, and they couldn't grind out more than 4 or 5 wins because of the offense being so pathetic. So there's still a quarterback and probably a coach away. So they're in the same. Yeah, they're probably praying for a Vic Fangio offense that averaged like 19 points a game. They would love they would love to see 1 extra field goal a week.
Yeah, it's amazing how slight of a change would make such big of a difference.
Yeah, it really would. Let's wrap up these last few minutes kind of talking about the AFC North. That was a big one we were talking about quite a bit throughout the season. Last week you talked about the 6-game stretch the Bengals had upcoming that they've just completed, where they needed to win 5 of 6. They had finished that going into the Chiefs game, and you thought, okay, I think especially if they get past the Chiefs, they're winning this division. I mean, I've been on that Ravens train. With my issue with them has been their inconsistency, which we saw again. Lamar is now hurt. They're going to have to win a couple games without him. Kind of deja vu compared to last year. But the Ravens were able to hold on to that division title. So they are the 3 seed in the AFC right now. But since he's coming, they got a huge win against the Chiefs. Give me your thoughts on the way this AFC North is going to shake out. I'm sure you're leaning towards Cincy wrapping up this division over the last 4 weeks of the season. What are you expecting out of them after that huge win this week? Do you think Baltimore can hang on in this little stretch without Lamar? Where do you sit with the AFC North at the moment? Because it's a pivotal division. Those are 2 teams we talked about that could legit compete in the AFC and knock off some teams or make a run to the Super Bowl. So this is a very pivotal division.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I mentioned it before that I think the Bengals have kind of shifted into a top 3 AFC team for me, at least Super Bowl contenders. So the only issue here is, and obviously Lamar Jackson going down for the Ravens is a huge loss. The only saving grace for the Ravens is that they have one of the easier schedules to finish out the year. They got the Steelers, the Browns, the Falcons, the Steelers again, and the Bengals. So honestly think this division could come down. And before I say this, on the flip side, the Bengals have one of the hardest schedules to finish the year, starting with the past 2 weekends, really, Titans and the Chiefs. They won both of those games, which is massive for their playoff hopes and hopefully division title. But they got the Browns, who they struggled with a couple weeks ago, and I think this is going to be a huge test for them this week. That Browns defense gave them fits a couple weeks ago. So do we see a different team? I mean, Jamar Chase didn't play in that game back whatever week that was, the end of October, and he's back. So they got the Browns, they got the Bucks, who we just talked about. It's just such a weird season for them. They could win that game or they could lose that game. Then they got the Patriots, who have been pretty bad since they beat the Jets a couple of weeks ago. And then you finish with the Bills and the Ravens. So they don't have any, easy wins on their schedule for the rest of the year, in my opinion. But I think Lamar going down is massive for the Ravens. And I think it's ultimately, this is a type of division battle that could come down to week 18, where a lot of teams at this point in the AFC, we'll see how it rolls out, but you're looking for a division title at that point. You're both 8-4. You got 5 games left. Depending on how the Ravens do with Lamar and without Lamar, and depending how the Bengals do with their difficult schedule remaining, it could very well come down to week 18. Lamar should be back by then, but you just don't know. He's coming off a knee injury, very mobile. Does that affect him in any way? Passing has always been his biggest red flag, but I feel like he's proved that he can pass it. But yeah, I do really like the Bengals. I think I'm sticking with the Bengals. I've been with the Bengals since week 1. I thought they were going to be a contender, and I think we're seeing that now. I think our prediction with that kind of middle of the season lull of not great teams that they had on their schedule, they blew through that 5-6, and then they won the last 2 against the Titans and the Chiefs. So they're looking really good. Jamar Chase is back and healthy. Burrow looks like MVP Burrow. I really like the Bengals. I do. I think they are kind of the Chiefs' kryptonite, if you will. The last 3 matchups against the Chiefs, the Bengals have won. Now, I'm not saying they're going to beat the Chiefs every time. I think the Chiefs are a different team in the playoffs, but the Bengals showed that last year. So I don't know. There's the AFC is super exciting. There's going to be so much to unfold. I think the playoffs are going to be so much fun this year, but you got to get there first. And I think I do like the Bengals in the AFC North, even though they're tied with the Ravens. Ravens obviously more favorable schedule, but that doesn't matter to me. With the Bengals, I think they're a top. I was going to say top 5. Like my top 5 from last week is totally shifted. But they're right there. They're right there in the top teams in the league. So I have confidence in them, and I think they'll win this division, and I think they could potentially win out. I think their toughest game is against the Bills, but at that point, we'll see if the Bills already clinched the division. So we'll see what changes in week 17, 18.
Rattle off your current top 5 for me.
Current top 5?
Yeah, you said it's changed a lot since last week.
It really has. Like in 1 week, it's changed so much. I'm going to go.
So last week you had Bills, Chiefs, Eagles, Cowboys, Dolphins in that order. What do you got now?
Yeah. Well, maybe it didn't change that much. I think it's Bills, Chiefs. 3, 4, 5 is tough. because I really like the Bengals. I think the Dolphins fall out. Niners fall out of that. They were on the bubble there. I think 3, 4, 5. I go Eagles. Cowboys, Bengals. So Bills, Chiefs, Eagles, Cowboys, Bengals.
Bills, Chiefs, order. Eagles, Cowboys, Bengals. Okay. So the Bengals have moved in. Going to be an interesting stretch down the last 4 or 5 weeks. I want you to give me a matchup to watch. I'll give you mine this week. Obviously, I think we didn't even get to talk about this Miami and LA Chargers game. That's going to be a big one. And that is massive for that playoff race because that shapes out what does it look like for the Jets. That 5, 6, 7 seed, a lot of it's going to hinge on can the Chargers stay competitive? Are the Dolphins going to drop 2 in a row? A couple tough back-to-back games. Like the Chargers are inconsistent, frustrating, but they're always tough. And they do oftentimes, you know they're a talented team, and this is going to be a great game to watch. So I'm excited to watch that on Sunday Night Football. The Chargers, I think it's a must-win for them, especially with the Raiders now sitting at 5 and 7. And I don't trust the Raiders at all, even though it's the Rams this week. But if they're sitting at 6 and 7, then you got the Chargers at 6 and 7. If they lose to Miami, like the Raiders, we talked about that last week. They've got a very slim chance. Don't think it happens. But if they won this past week, if they can win again this week, like they're in it. It's opportunistic, and then things really get tight in the AFC wild card from that 6 through 9 spot. So it's going to be interesting to watch. One other matchup to note this week that I want to certainly keep an eye on is actually going to be that Tampa Bay San Francisco game. They've lost Jimmy G. Tampa Bay, I thought looked as bad as they could look last week and just somehow managed to win. That's going to shape out the NFC playoff picture as well. Whether or not San Francisco, they've still got to fight off Seattle a little bit there without Jimmy G. So a couple matchups to note there. What is your top matchup or two this week?
I think we're pretty much spot on there. I think the Bucks Niners game is a really good opportunity to see what the Niners bring without Jimmy G. Can that defense just continue to hold them up, and is the offense enough? So that's a huge game for me. I was going to call out the Raiders before you even said it. I think they're slowly creeping up into okay, we got to look out for the Raiders. And I think that's entirely dependent on the Chargers-Dolphins game. So if the Chargers win that game, I think the Raiders it's going to be really difficult for them to get in. But, I mean, Dolphins need to win too. Dolphins really need to win, especially after losing last week. So
and the AFC is tight, and it's brutal,
Yeah, last thing, or 2 last games, I'll say. I want to see what the Bengals do with the Browns. I want to see them respond to what happened a couple weeks ago. Where I think they struggled, and again, they were out without Jamar Chase, which we've talked about. He literally was the reason they went to the Super Bowl last year, in my opinion. Like, Burrow was good, really good, but he was really good because of Jamar Chase. If they drafted Penei Sewell instead of Jamar Chase, like a lot of people were suggesting, I don't think they would have made the Super Bowl. So I want to see the Bengals respond versus the Browns. I'm interested to see the Ravens versus Steelers. Are the Ravens going to fall off without Lamar, or are they going to still stay competitive? And then I'm really interested in the Lions and the Vikings. I think the Lions are fighting for a playoff spot. Going to see how good the Vikings really are. I think the Vikings are good. I don't think they're great. I think they're not as good as their record kind of indicates. And I think the Lions are really heating up. And they're a really fun team to watch. I'd love to see the Lions get into the playoffs. So that's going to be a fun one. That's in Detroit. So division battle. So those are the games I'm really looking at. I mean, that's quite a bit of games. I think there's a lot of interesting playoff movement games this week. Dolphins, Chargers, Bucks, Niners, Ravens, Steelers, Browns, Bengals, and Lions, Vikings, even Raiders, Rams. So that's 6 out of however many games. There's not many games because of the 4 buys this week. Stupid, by the way, but there's not that many games. I think all of them are pretty important, and we didn't even talk about the Jets and the Bills. So yeah, there's a lot that's going to happen this weekend.
If you want to hear more Jets and Bills talk, you can head over to one of our podcasts. I know Jet Up will be talking quite a bit about that matchup as well. But, man, I appreciate you jumping on here as always. You can find him at RobMcW24. You can find me at Cody Ingle. Check us out at rostermedia.com and at rostermedia on all social channels. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Enjoy week 14.